A piece of cake. Chapter 1. The Sweet Surprise. Janelle was halfway through reconciling invoices when the desk phone rattled to life. She squinted at the columns of numbers on her screen, rubbing the edge of her temple with the tip of her pen. Numbers had a way of slipping out of place when the office AC ran too cold. She was just about to double-check the totals when the receptionist's voice came through, chipper as ever. "Miss Janelle, you got a delivery down here." Janelle blinked, caught off guard. She wasn't expecting anything. Certainly not in the middle of a Tuesday that smelled like burnt coffee and toner. She slipped her heels back on, smoothed her skirt, and muttered, "Lord, don't let this be another mistake with the printer parts." Downstairs, the receptionist grinned and pushed a white box across the counter. It had a red satin ribbon tied neat and snug, the kind of ribbon only a bakery would fuss with. The tag in curly handwriting said for Janelle. Her heart gave a little skip. Marcus! He must have done it. He must have remembered how they'd argued the night before about bills, about the late nights at the bakery, about the little things that never stayed little. Maybe this was his way of saying sorry. Apology, baked and boxed. She carried it upstairs, smiling without realizing it, and by the time she reached her desk, 2 coworkers had already leaned over the cubicle wall like curious birds. "Ooh, girl, what you got?" asked Bianca, the office gossip whose nose twitched whenever sugar was near. Janelle laughed nervously. "Looks like my husband's trying to get back in my good graces." She set the box down, untied the ribbon, and waved at the others. "Y'all come get a slice before I change my mind." A small crowd gathered, the office suddenly alive with giggles and jokes. Someone said, "That man of yours must want something." Another teased, "He better have put red velvet in there after the week we've had." Janelle slid her nails under the lid, lifting it with a little flourish. The room hushed. The laughter drained out of the air. Scrawled across the frosting in shaky chocolate cream, "I am divorcing you." And right in the center, gleaming against the buttercream like an ugly jewel, was a pregnancy test. 2 bright pink lines stared back. For a moment, Janelle couldn't breathe. Her mind flipped back to last Sunday, standing in her bathroom, robe tied too loose, staring at the same pair of pink lines in disbelief. She had dropped it in the trash, telling herself it couldn't be real. Not with Marcus, not with his diagnosis. Her throat tightened as heat crawled up her ears. She reached for a laugh, but it came out strangled. Coworkers shuffled back. A few whispered. Bianca's hand touched her shoulder, then pulled away like she touched something too hot. One by one, they made excuses and drifted off, leaving her with the cake, the test, and the pounding in her chest. She closed the lid, tied the ribbon with shaky fingers, and carried it into the break room, setting it gently beside the microwave no one ever cleaned. Her steps were careful, as if the box might explode. Back at her desk, she sank into her chair, staring at the invoices she'd left half done. The numbers swam, her pen useless in her hand. She could still feel every pair of eyes that had lingered on her. The whispers would make their rounds before the end of the day. Her husband, the baker, sending her humiliation wrapped in frosting. She folded her arms on the desk and lowered her head, willing the world to stop for just 1 second. But the phones rang, keyboards clicked, and life rolled on without mercy. By the time 5 o'clock crept near, Janelle gathered her things with mechanical precision. Purse, keys, phone. She kept her head down as she passed coworkers who pretended to be busy. At the parking lot, she finally let out the breath she'd been holding all day. Her car waited, the hood speckled with pollen. But tucked under her windshield wiper was an envelope. She frowned, plucked it free, and opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a bakery order slip, stained with a smudge of chocolate. At the bottom, in messy handwriting, someone had scrawled. He said, "Make it final." Janelle froze, the note fluttering in her hand like a live thing. The handwriting wasn't Marcus's. Chapter 2. The Whispers. The drive home felt longer than it had any right to be. Houston traffic wasn't even heavy that evening, but every stoplight lingered too long. Every turn seemed sharper, and the hum of the tires on the pavement pressed against Janelle's temples like a drumbeat she couldn't silence. She kept replaying the scene from the office, the stunned silence, the frosting letters, the pink lines. Shame clung to her like sweat. She could almost hear Bianca whispering into someone's voicemail, "Girl, you won't believe what just happened today." By morning, the whole office would know. By the end of the week, the whole city might. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as she turned down her street. The little one-story ranch she and Marcus had bought 2 years ago sat waiting, new paint giving a fresh pop of color on the shutters, lemon balm sprawling stubbornly across the front steps. Home had always been their sanctuary, cluttered but alive. Tonight it looked smaller, dimmer, as though it already knew trouble was waiting inside. Janelle sat in the car for a moment with the engine ticking quiet. She could see Marcus's work shoes by the door, one tipped on its side. His apron hung over the porch rail, flowers smudged in ghostly patches. A swing creaked gently in the humid breeze. She forced herself out, her heels clicking on the walkway. As soon as she opened the front door, the familiar smells hit her: yeast, sugar, cinnamon. But there was something sour underneath too, like tension left out too long. Inside, their life sat waiting, unchanged. 3 mixing bowls dried on the counter, a saint's mug with a crack along the rim still sat by the sink. On the fridge, a sticky note grocery list clung to its magnet: eggs, sugar, patience. She'd written it weeks ago, and Marcus had laughed. "You can't buy patience at Kroger," he'd said. But she had left it up anyway. Now it looked like a cruel joke. She dropped her purse on the arm of the couch and sank into the cushions. Her body wanted to cry, to scream, to do anything to let the pressure out, but she just sat, staring at the muted television that Marcus must have left on earlier. A game show flickered silently, contestants smiling too brightly. Her mind went backwards, searching for answers. 2 years of marriage. 18 months of doctor's visits, tests, and sterile rooms where she sat holding his hand while white coats explained in gentle tones that Marcus's numbers were low. Too low. Natural conception unlikely, one had said, scribbling notes while Marcus's jaw tightened. He had called it fate. "Guess the Lord don't want us making more mess," he'd muttered once, half joking. She had smiled, even as her heart sank. But she had never stopped wondering, never stopped hoping. And when she'd seen those 2 pink lines that morning, her chest had soared and collapsed all at once. She had told herself it was impossible, that it had to be wrong. Now she wasn't sure what scared her more, that it was real or that it wasn't. The shrill buzz of her phone jolted her out of thought. A new voicemail. She glanced down at the screen. Doctor's office. Memorial Women's Health. Her thumb hovered, but she couldn't bring herself to press play. Instead, she shoved the phone into her purse, heart pounding. From the corner of her eye, she saw a shadow sweep past the front window. Then the jangle of keys at the lock. Marcus. He came in like a storm. Apron still on. Flour dusting his arms and chest like chalk, eyes dark and wild. His pacing started before he even spoke, boots grinding the worn floorboards. "Tell me the test isn't yours," he barked, voice raw. No hello. No soft entry. Just a demand. Janelle froze. For a moment, the only sound was the faint creak of the ceiling fan overhead. She swallowed hard, her mouth dry as bone. "It is mine," she said quietly, steadying herself against the couch arm. Marcus stopped mid-stride, staring at her like she'd slapped him. His breath came short, and his fists opened and closed like he wanted to knead the truth into something softer. Chapter 3. The Confrontation. The house was so still after his words that Janelle could hear the clock in the kitchen ticking, each second louder than the last. She hadn't moved since she told him the test was hers. She sat on the couch, knees drawn together, hands gripping each other tight enough to hurt, staring at Marcus as he paced like a man chasing his own shadow. The air smelled faintly of yeast and flour from his clothes, but underneath it was something sharper, the sour tang of fear. He was unraveling right in front of her, and she couldn't tell if it was anger at her or at himself. Finally, he stopped and turned, eyes blazing. "You're saying that test is yours?" His voice was tight, almost pleading, though it came out sharp. "You're really telling me that?" "Yes." Janelle's voice was steady, though her stomach nodded. "It's mine." Marcus dragged his hand down his face, then turned and slammed his palm against the wall. The wedding photo rattled and tilted, their frozen smiles mocking the room. "You know what it looks like?" he said, his words spilling fast now. "To me? To everybody else?" You walk in with that test and all I see is betrayal. That's what it looks like. I didn't betray you. Her voice rose, just enough to cut through his fury. His head snapped toward her. Then explain it, Janelle. The doctor said it wasn't possible. Said I couldn't? He broke off, voice catching in his throat. And then this? A test like that? Popping up out of nowhere? Her chest heaved, but she forced herself to her feet. She went to her purse, fingers searching until they touched the folded paper she had avoided for days. She pulled it free and laid it on the coffee table between them. I wasn't ready to show you this, she said quietly, but here. He glanced at the letter, then back at her, suspicion still sharp in his eyes. This isn't about another man, she said firmly. That test could have come up positive because my body's making HCG, but not because of a baby. Her throat tightened. Because of something else. I Googled it and it could be a tumor. Marcus froze, blinking, as if her words didn't compute. They've been calling me, she continued, voice cracking. I didn't answer. I didn't want to hear it. I thought maybe if I ignored it, it would go away. She touched the paper with trembling fingers. But it's right there. Elevated hormones, which means a possible ovarian tumor. He staggered back a step, eyes wide, mouth opening and closing without sound. Finally, a single word scraped out. Cancer? I don't know for sure yet, she said quickly. But I'm worried because of how Big Mama passed. The silence that fell between them was heavier than any shouting could have been. Marcus lowered himself into the recliner, elbows on his knees, face buried in his hands. He stayed like that for a long moment, his chest rising and falling unevenly. When he finally looked up, his face was pale, his voice hoarse. For the past week, I thought you were sneaking around, making a fool out of me. You thought that because it was easier than asking me, Janelle shot back. Her tears finally slipped free, streaking down her cheeks. You chose pride over trust, Marcus. You made that choice. He flinched like she'd struck him, then looked away. His hands curled into fists against his knees. Something flickered in his eyes, shame, but also something else, something unsettled. This don't line up, he muttered almost to himself. None of it lines up. What doesn't? She pressed. He opened his mouth, then shut it again. His jaw worked as if he were holding something back. He shook his head and stood abruptly, grabbing his keys off the counter. The jangle echoed like a gavel in the quiet room. I can't do this right now, he said, voice breaking. I need to think. Marcus, she started, but he was already at the door. He paused there, hand on the knob, his back to her. His shoulders slumped, heavy with something unsaid. For a second she thought he might turn, confess, explain. But instead he opened the door and walked out into the night without looking back. The latch clicked closed, leaving the house hollow. Janelle stood staring at the empty space he'd left behind, her hand still on the letter. Her chest rose and fell in shallow bursts, her tears drying on her face. The quiet pressed in around her, suffocating. Then her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She swiped at it with shaky fingers. A new message glowed on the screen from an unknown number. He didn't write the words. Come to the bakery after close. Come alone. Her pulse quickened. For the first time that night, Janelle felt the shape of a truth shifting just out of reach. Bigger than Marcus's anger, bigger than her fear, and even bigger than her embarrassment. And she knew she had to go find it.